We know now that in the earlier years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's, and yet, as moral as his own, we know now that as human beings busied themselves about their various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied, perhaps almost as narrowly as man with a microscope might scrutinize the transient creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. With infinite compliance, people went to and fro over the earth about little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which, by chance or design, man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space. Yet across the immense ethereal gulf, minds that are to our minds as ours are to the beasts in the jungle, intellects vast, cool, and unsympathetic, regarded this earth with envious eyes, and slowly and surely do their plans against us. In the 39th year of the 20th century came the great disillusionment. It was near the end of October. Business was better. The war scare was over. More men were back at work. Sales were picking up. On this particular evening, October 30th, the Crowley service estimated about that 32 million people were listening in on radios.
For the next 24 hours, not much change in temperature. A slight atmospheric disturbance of undetermined origin is reported over Nova Scotia, causing a low-pressure area to move down rather rapidly over the northeastern states, bringing a forecast of rain accompanied by winds of light gale force. Maximum temperature 66, minimum 48. This weather report comes to you from the Government Weather Bureau. We take you now to the Meridian Room in Hotel Park Plaza in downtown New York, where you'll be entertained by the music of Ramon Requello and his orchestra.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. From the Meridian Room in the Park Plaza Hotel in New York City, we bring you the music of Ramon Requello and his orchestra. With a touch of Spanish, Ramon Requello leads off La Comparsita.
Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt our program of dance music to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News. At 20 minutes before 8 Central Time, Professor Farrell of the Mount Jennings Observatory, Chicago, Illinois, reports observing several explosions of incandescent gas occurring at regular intervals on the planet Mars. The spectroscope indicates the gas to be hydrogen and moving towards the Earth with enormous velocity. Professor Pearson of the observatory at Princeton confirms Farrell's observation and describes the phenomenon as, quote, like a jet of blue flame shot from a gun, unquote. We now return you to the music of Ramon Requello, playing for you in the Meridian Room at the Park Plaza Hotel situated in downtown New York.
And now, a tune that never loses favor, the ever-popular Stardust, Ramon Requello and his orchestra.
Ladies and gentlemen, following on the news given in our bulletin a moment ago, the Government Meteorological Bureau has requested the large observatories of the country to keep an astronomical watch on any further disturbances occurring on the planet Mars. The music of Ramon Requello and his orchestra. We are ready now to take you to the Princeton Observatory at Princeton, where Carl Phillips, our commentator, will interview Professor Richard Pearson, famous astronomer, We take you now to Princeton, New Jersey.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Carl Phillips speaking to you from the Observatory of Princeton. I'm standing in a large, semicircular room, pitch black, except for an oblong split in the ceiling. Through this opening, I can see a sprinkling of stars that cast a kind of frosty glow over the inaccurate mechanism of the huge telescope. The ticking sound you hear is the vibration of the clockwork. Professor Pearson stands directly above me on a small platform peering through the giant lens. I ask you to be patient, ladies and gentlemen, during any delay that may arise during our interview. Besides her ceaseless watch of the heavens, Professor Pearson may be interrupted by telephone or other communications. During this period, she is in constant touch with the astronomical centers of the world. Professor, may I begin our questions?
At any time, Mr. Phillips.
Professor, would you please tell our radio audience exactly what you see as you observe the planet Mars through your telescope?
Nothing unusual at the moment, Mr. Phillips. A red disk swimming in a blue sea. Transverse stripes across the disk. Quite distinct now, because Mars happens to be the point nearest to Earth, in opposition, as we call it.
In your opinion, what do these transverse stripes signify, Professor Pearson?
Not canals, I can assure you, Mr. Phillips.
I see.
Although, that's a popular conjecture of those who imagine Mars to be inhabited. From a scientific viewpoint, the stripes are merely the result of the atmospheric conditions peculiar to the planet.
Then you are quite convinced, as a scientist, that living intelligence as we know it does not exist on Mars.
I'd say the chances against it are 1,000 to 1.
And yet, how do you account for the strange gas eruptions occurring on the surface on the planet at regular intervals?
Mr. Phillips, I cannot account for it.
By the way, Professor, for the benefit of our listeners, how far is Mars from the planet Earth?
Approximately 40 million miles.
Well, that seems a safe enough distance.
Thank you.
Just a moment, ladies and gentlemen. Someone has just handed Professor Pearson a message. While she reads it, let me remind you that we are speaking to you from the observatory in Princeton, New Jersey. We were interviewing the world-famous astronomer, Professor Pearson. One moment, Professor Pearson has just passed me a message which he has just received. Professor, may I read the message to our listening audience?
Certainly, Mr. Phillips.
Ladies and gentlemen, I shall read you a wire addressed to Professor Pearson from Dr. Gray of the National History Museum, New York. Quote, 9:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, seismograph registered a shock of almost earthquake intensity, occurring within a radius of 20 miles of Princeton. Please investigate. Signed, Lloyd Gray, Chief Astronomer of the Astronomical Division, unquote. Professor Pearson, could this occurrence possibly have something to do with the disturbances observed on the planet Mars?
Hardly, Mr. Phillips. This is probably a meteorite of unusual size, and its arrival at this particular time is merely a coincidence. However, we shall conduct a search as soon as daylight permits.
Thank you, Professor. Ladies and gentlemen, for the past 10 minutes, we have been speaking to you from the observatory at Princeton, bringing you a special interview with Professor Pearson, noted astronomer. This is Carl Phillips speaking. We returning you now to your New York studio.
Ladies and gentlemen, here's the latest bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News, Toronto, Canada. Professor Morse of McMillan University reports observing a total of 3 explosions on the planet Mars between the hours of 7:45 p.m. and 9:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This confirms earlier reports received from American observatories. Now, nearer home comes a special bulletin from Trenton, New Jersey. It is reported that at 8:50 p.m., a huge flaming object, believed to be a meteorite, fell on a farm in the neighborhood of Grover's Mill, New Jersey, 22 miles from Trenton. The flash in the sky was visible within a radius of 700 miles, and the noise of the impact was heard as far north as Elizabeth. We have dispatched a special mobile unit to the scene, and we'll have our commentator, Carl Phillips, give you a word picture of the scene as soon as he can reach there from Princeton. In the meantime, we take you to the Hotel Martinet in Brooklyn, where Bobby Millett and his orchestra are offering a program of dance music. We We take you now to Grover's Mill, New Jersey.
Oh my god. Oh my god, what's happening?
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Carl Phillips again of the Wilmoth Farm, Grover's Mill, New Jersey. Professor Pearson and myself have made the 11 miles from Princeton in 10 minutes. Well, I hardly know where to begin. To paint a word picture for you of the strange scene before my eyes, like something out of a modern Arabian Nights. Well, I just got here. I haven't had a chance to look around yet. I guess that's it, yes. I guess the thing directly in front of me, half buried in a vast pit, must have struck the ground with terrific force. The ground is covered with splinters of a tree. It must have hit on its way down. What I can see of the object itself doesn't look very much like a meteor. At least, none of the meteors that I've seen. It looks more like a huge cylinder. It has a diameter of... What would you say, Professor Pearson?
What's that?
What would you say? What is the diameter of this?
About 30 yards.
About 30 yards. The metal on the sheath is, well, I've never seen anything like it. The color is sort of yellowish-white. Curious spectators are now pressing close to the object, in spite of efforts of the police to keep them back. They're getting in front of the line of vision. Would you mind staying to one side, please?
One side, then one side.
While the policemen are pushing back the crowd, here's Mr. Wilmoth, owner of the farm here, who may have some interesting facts to add. Mr. Wilmoth, would you please tell the radio audience as much as you remember of this rather unusual visitor that dropped in your backyard? Step closer, please. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mr. Wilmoth.
Well, I was listening to the radio.
Closer and louder, please.
Pardon me?
Louder, please, and closer.
Yes, sir. I was listening to the radio and was kind of drowsing. That professor fellow was talking about, what was it, Mars? So I was half dozing and half...
Yes, Mr. Wilmoth, and then what happened?
Well, as I was saying, I was listening to the radio, kinda halfways.
Yes, Mr. Wilmoth, and then you saw something?
Not first off, I heard something.
And what did you hear?
It sounded like this, kinda like a 4th of July rocket.
Yes, then what?
I turned my head out my window. Would have swore I was asleep and dreaming.
Yes?
I seen that kinda greenish streak and then... Zingo! Something smacked the ground. Knocked me clear out my chair.
Well, were you frightened, Mr. Wilmoth?
Well, I ain't quite sure. I reckon I was kinda riled.
Thank you, Mr. Wilmoth. Thank you very much.
Hey, want me to tell you something more?
No, that's quite alright. That's plenty. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard Mr. Wilmoth, owner of the farm where this thing has fallen. I wish I could convey the atmosphere, the background of this fantastic scene.
Oh my god. Wow. It's crazy.
Hundreds of cars are packed in the fields in the back of us. The police are trying to rope off the roadway leading into the farm, but it's no use. They're breaking right through. Car's headlights throw an enormous spotlight on the pit where the object is half buried. Now some more of Darling Souls are venturing near the edge. Their silhouettes stand out against the metal sheen. One man wants to touch the thing. He's having an argument with a policeman. The policeman wins. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there's something I haven't mentioned in all this excitement, but now it's becoming more distinct. Perhaps you've caught it on your radio already. Listen, please. Do you hear it? It's a curious humming sound that seems to come from inside the object. I'll move the microphone nearer now. Now we're not more than 25 feet away. Can you hear it now? Oh, Professor Pearson.
Yes, Mr. Phillips?
Can you tell us the meaning of that scraping noise coming from inside the thing?
Possibly the uncooling of its surface.
I see. Do you still think it's a meteor, Professor?
I don't know what to think. The metal casing is definitely extraterrestrial, not found on this Earth. Friction with the Earth's atmosphere usually tears holes in a meteorite. This thing is smooth and, as you can see, of cylindrical shape.
Just a minute. Something's happening. Ladies and gentlemen, this is terrific. The end of the thing is beginning to flake off. The top of the thing is beginning to rotate like a screw. It must be hollow.
Oh my god. That's
Stand back.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the most terrific thing I've ever seen. I've ever witnessed. Wait a minute. Something's crawling out of the hollow top. Someone or something. I can see it peering out of the black hole. 2 luminous discs. Are they eyes? It might be a face. It might be...
Oh my god, this is crazy!
What is that?
Oh my god!
Good heavens. Something's wriggling out of the shadow like a gray snake. Now it's another one. And another one. And another. They look like tentacles to me. I can see the thing's body now. It's large as a bear. And it glistens like a wet leather. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, it's indescribable. I can hardly force myself to keep looking at it. It's so awful. The eyes are black, and they gleam like a serpent. The mouth it's V-shaped, with saliva dripping from its rimless lips. They seem to quiver and pulsate. The monster, or whatever it is, can hardly move. It seems weighed down, possibly by gravity? Or something. The thing is rising up now, and the crowd falls back. I bet they've seen plenty. This is the most extraordinary experience, ladies and gentlemen. I can hardly find the words. I'll pull this microphone with me as I talk. I'll have to stop describing it until I can find a new position. Hold on, I will be right back.
We are bringing you an eyewitness account of what's happening on the Wilmoth Farm, Grover's Mill, New Jersey. We now return you to Carl Phillips at Grover's Mill.
Ladies and am I on? Ladies and gentlemen, here I am, back of a stone wall that adjoins Mr. Wilmoth's garden. From here, I can get a sweep of the whole scene. I will give you every detail as long as I can talk and as long as I can see. More state police have arrived. They're drawing up a cordon in front of the pit, about 30 of them. No need to push the crowd back now. They're willing to keep their distance. The captain is conferring with someone. I can't quite see who. Oh, yes, I believe it is Professor Pearson. Yes, it is. Now they've parted ways, and the professor moves around to one side, studying the object, while the captain and 2 policemen advance with something in their hands. I can see it now. It's a white handkerchief tied to a pole. It's a flag of truce. If those creatures know what that means, what anything means... Wait a minute. Something's happening. A hump shape is rising out of the pit. I can make out a small beam of light against a mirror. What's that? There's a jet of flame springing from that mirror, and it leaps right at the advancing men. It strikes them head on. Good Lord, they're turning into flames! The whole field's caught on fire. woods, the barns, the gas tanks of automobiles. It's spreading everywhere. It's coming this way. It's about 20 yards to my...
Ladies and gentlemen, due to circumstances beyond our control, we are unable to continue the broadcast from Grover's Mill. Evidently, there's some difficulty with our field transmission. However, we will return to that point at the earliest opportunity. In the meantime, we have the latest bulletin from San Diego, California. Professor Eidenkoffer, speaking at a dinner of the California Astronomical Society, expressed the opinion that the explosions on Mars are undoubtedly nothing more than severe volcanic disturbances on the surface of the planet. We continue now with our piano interlude.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have just been handed a message that came in from Grover's Mill by telephone. Just one moment, please. At least 40 people, including 6 state troopers, lie dead in a field east of the village of Grover's Mill, their bodies burned and distorted beyond all possible recognition. The next voice you hear will be that of Brigadier General Montgomery Smith, commander of the state militia at Trenton, New Jersey.
I have been requested by the governor of New Jersey to place the counties of Mercer and Middlesex as far as West Boston and east to Jamesburg under martial law. No one will be permitted to enter this area except by special pass issued by the state or military authorities. 4 companies of state militia are proceeding from Trenton to Governor's Mill and will aid in the evacuation of homes within the range of military operations. Thank you.
You have just been listening to General Montgomery Smith, commanding the state militia at Trenton. In the meantime, further details of the catastrophe at Grover's Mill are coming back in. The strange creatures, after unleashing their deadly assault, crawled back in their pit and made no attempt to prevent the efforts of the firemen to recover their bodies and extinguish the fire. The combined fire departments of Mercer County are fighting the flames which menace the entire countryside. We have been unable to establish any contact with our mobile unit at Grover's Mill, but we hope we are able to return you at the earliest possible moment. In the meantime, we take you... Just one moment, please.
We got contact with them.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have just been informed that we have finally established communication with an eyewitness of the tragedy. Professor Pearson has been located at a farmhouse near Grover's Mill, where she has established an emergency observation post. As a scientist, she will give you her explanation of the calamity. The next voice you'll hear will be that of Professor Pearson, brought to you by Direct Wire. Professor Pearson.
Of the creatures in rocket cylinder at Grover's Mill, I can give you no authoritative information, either to their nature, their origin, or their purposes here on Earth. Of their destructive instrument, I might venture some conjectural explanation. For want of a better term, I shall refer to this mysterious weapon as a heat ray. It's all too evident that these creatures have scientific knowledge far in advance of our own. It's my guess that in some way they are able to generate an intense heat in a chamber of practically absolute no conductivity. This intense heat they project in a parallel beam against any object they choose by means of a polished parabolic mirror of unknown composition, much as a mirror of a lighthouse projects a beam of light. And that is my conjecture of the origin of the heat ray.
Thank you, Professor Pearson. Ladies and gentlemen, here's a bulletin from Trenton. It is a brief statement informing us that the charred body of Carl Phillips has been identified in a Trenton hospital. Now here's another bulletin from Washington, D.C. The Office of the Director of the National Red Cross reports 10 units of Red Cross emergency workers have been assigned to the headquarters of the state militia stationed outside of Grover's Mill, New Jersey. Here's a bulletin from State Police, Princeton Junction. The fires at Grover's Mill and vicinity are now under control. Scouts report all quiet in the pit, and there is no sign of life appearing from the mouth of the cylinder. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a special statement from Mr. Harry McDonald, Vice President in charge of operations.
We have received, upon request of the state militia at Trenton, to place at their disposal our entire broadcasting facilities. In view of the gravity of the situation, and believing that radio has a responsibility to serve the public interest at all times, we are turning over our facilities to the state militia at Trenton.
We take you now to the field headquarters of the state militia near Grover's Mill, New Jersey.
This is Captain Lyson of the Senior Corps, attached to the state militia, now engaged in military operation in the vicinity of Governor's Mill. Situation arising from the reported presence of certain individuals of unidentified nature is now under complete control. The cylindrical object, which lies in a pit directly below our position, is surrounded on all sides by 8 battalions of infantry. Without heavy field pieces, but adequately armed with rifles and machine guns, all cause for alarm, if such cause ever existed, is now entirely unjustified. The things, whatever they are, do not even venture to poke their head above the pit. I can see their hiding place plainly in the glare of the searchlights here. With all their reported resources, these creatures can scarcely stand up against heavy machine gun fire. Anyway, it's an interesting outing for the troops. I can make out their khaki uniform crossing back and forth in front of the lights. It looks almost like real war. There appear to be some slight smoke in the woods bordering the Millstone River, probably fire started by campers. Well, we ought to see some action soon. One of the companies is deploying on the left flank, a quick thrust and it will be all over. Now wait, I can see something on the top of the cylinder. No, it's nothing but a shadow. Now the troops are on the edge of the Wilmsmore farm. 7,000 armed men closing in on an old metal tube, a tube rather. Wait, that wasn't a shadow. It was something moving. Solid metal, kind of a shield like a fairing rising up out of the cylinder. It's going higher and higher. Why is it standing on legs? Actually, dragging up on a sort of metal framework. Now it's reaching above the trees and the searchlights are on it. Hold on.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a grave announcement to make. Incredible as it may seem, both the observations of science and the evidence of our eyes lead to the inescapable assumption that those strange beings who landed in the Jersey farmlands tonight are the vanguard of an invading army from the planet Mars. The battle which took place at Grover Mill has ended in one of the most startling defeats ever suffered by an army in modern times. 7,000 men armed with rifles, machine guns, pitted against a single fighting machine of the invaders from Mars. 120 known survivors, the rest strewn over the battle area from Grover's Mill to Plainsboro, crushed and trampled to death under the metal feet of the monster, or burned to cinders by its heat ray. The monster is now in control of the middle section of New Jersey, and has effectively cut the state through its center. Communication lines are down from Pennsylvania to the Atlantic Ocean. Railroad tracks are torn and service from New York to Philadelphia discontinued, except routing some of the trains through Allentown and Phoenixville. Highways to the north, south, and west are clogged with frantic human traffic. Police and army reserves are unable to control the mad flight. By morning, the fugitives will have swelled Philadelphia, Camden, and Trenton. It is estimated to twice their normal population. Martial law prevails throughout New Jersey and eastern Pennsylvania. At this time, we take you to Washington for a special broadcast on the national emergency. The Secretary of Interior.
Citizens of nation, I shall not try to conceal the gravity of the situation that confronts the country or the concern of your government. In protecting the lives and property of its people, however, I wish to impress upon you, private citizens and public officials, all of you, the urgent need of calm and resourceful action. Fortunately, this formidable enemy is still confined to a comparatively small area, and we may place our faith in the military forces to keep them there. In the meantime, placing our faith in God, we must continue the performance of our duties, each and every one of us, so that we may confront this destructive adversary with a nation united, courageous, and consecrated to the preservation of supremacy on this earth. I thank you.
You have just heard the Secretary of the Interior speaking from Washington. Bulletins too numerous to read are piling up in the studio here. We are informed the central portion of New Jersey is blacked out from radio communication due to the effect of the heat ray upon power lines and electrical equipment. Here is a special bulletin from New York. Cables have been received from English, French, and German scientific bodies offering assistance. Astronomers report continued gas outbursts at regular intervals on the planet of Mars. The majority voiced the opinion that the enemy will be reinforced by additional rocket machines. There have been several attempts made to locate Professor Pearson of Princeton, who has made observing Martians at close range. It is feared she was lost in the recent battle. Langham Field, Virginia. Scouting planes report 3 Martian machines visible above the treetops, moving north towards Somerville with population fleeing ahead of them. The heat ray is not in use. Although advancing at express train speed, invaders pick their way carefully. They seem to be making a conscious effort to avoid destruction of cities and countryside. However, they stop to uproot power lines, bridges, and railroad tracks. Their apparent objective is to crush resistance, paralyze communication, and disorganize human society. Here is a bulletin from Basking Ridge, New Jersey. Coon hunters have stumbled upon a second cylinder similar to the first in bed in the Great Swamp 20 miles south of Morriston. Army field pieces are proceeding from Newark to blow up the second invading unit before the cylinder can be opened and the fighting machines rigged. They are taking up position in the foothills of the Watchung Mountains. Another bulletin from Langham Field, Virginia. Scouting planes report the enemy machines, now 3 in number, increasing speed northward, kicking over houses, trees, in an evident haste to form a conjugation with their allies south of Morriston. Machines also sighted by telephone operator east of Middlesex, within 10 miles of Plainsfield. Here's a bulletin from Winston Field, Long Island. A fleet of Army bombers carrying heavy explosives flying northward in pursuit of the enemy. Scouting planes act as guides. They keep the speeding enemy in sight.
Hey, we have the
Just a moment, ladies and gentlemen.
to the military. We got it hooked up.
We've run special wires to the artillery line in adjacent villages to give you direct reports in the zone of the advancing enemy. First, we take you to the battery of the 22nd Field Artillery, located in the Watchung Mountains.
Range 32 meters.
32 meters.
Projection 39 degrees.
39 degrees.
Fire.
140 yards to the right, sir.
Shift range 31 meters.
31 meters,
Projection 37 degrees.
37 degrees.
Fire!
A hit, sir. We've got the tripod of one of them. They've stopped. The others are trying to repair it.
Quick, get the range. Shift 30 meters.
30 meters,
Projection 27 degrees.
37 degrees.
Fire!
Can't see the shell land, sir. They're letting off a smoke.
What is it?
A black smoke, sir. Moving this way. Lying close to the ground. It's moving fast.
Put gas masks on. Get ready to fire. Shift to 24 meters.
24 meters,
Projection 24 degrees.
24 degrees.
Fire!
Still can't see, sir. The smoke's coming nearer.
Get the range.
23 meters.
23 meters.
23 meters,
Projection 23 degrees.
22 degrees. Army bombing plane V-843 of Bayonne, New Jersey, Lieutenant Vaught, commanding 8 bombers, reporting to Command Fairfax Lungham Field. This is Vaught reporting to Commander Fairfax Lungham Field. Enemy tripod machine now in sight, reinforced by 3 machines from the Morristown cylinder. 6. Alright, 1 machine's partially crippled. Believed hit by a shell from Army guns in Wichita Mountains. Guns now appear silent. A heavy black fog hanging close to the earth of extreme density, nature unknown. No sight of heat ray. Enemy now turns east, crossing the Passaic River into the Jersey Marsh. Another straddles the Passaic Skyway. Evident objective is New York City. They're pushing down a high-tension power station. The machines are close together now, and we're ready to attack. Plane circling, ready to start strike. 1,000 yards and we'll be over the first. 800 yards, 600 yards, 400 yards, 200 yards. There they go. A giant arm raised. Green flash, they're spraying us with flames. 2,000 feet. Engines are giving out. No chance of releasing bombs. Only one thing left. Drop on them, plane it all. We're diving on the first one. Now the engines are 8.
This is Bayonne, New Jersey. Calling Langham Field. This is Bayonne, New Jersey. Calling Langham Field. Come in, please.
This is Langham Field. Go ahead.
8 Army bombers in engagement with enemy tripod machines over Jersey Flats. Engines incapacitated by heat rate. All crash. One enemy destroyed. Enemy now discharging heavy black smoke in direction of...
This is New York, New Jersey. This is New York, New Jersey. Warning. Poisonous black smoke pouring in from Jersey marshes. Regis South Street. Gas masks useless. Urge population move into open spaces. Automobiles use route 72324. Avoid congested areas. Smoke now spreading over Raymond Boulevard.
2X2L, calling. CQ, 2X2L, calling. CQ, 2X2L, calling. 8XR, 8X3R, coming. Please.
This is 8X3R coming back at 2X2L.
High reception. High reception. K, please. Where are you? 8X3R. What's the matter? Where are you?
From the roof of the Broadcasting Building, New York City. I'm speaking from the roof of the Broadcasting Building, New York City. The bells you hear are ringing to warn people to evacuate the city as the Martians approach. Estimated in the last 2 hours, 3 million people have moved out along roads to the north. Hutchison River Parkway is still kept open for motor traffic. Avoid bridges to Long Island, hopelessly jammed. All communication with Jersey Shore closed 10 minutes ago. No more defenses. Our army is wiped out. Artillery, Air Force, everything wiped out. This may be the last broadcast. We'll stay here to the end. People are holding service here below us in the cathedral. Now I look down to the harbor. All manner of boats, overloaded with fleeing population, pulling out from the docks. Streets are all jammed. Noise and crowd like New Year's Eve in the city. Wait a minute. The enemy is now in sight. Above the Palisades. Five great machines. First one's crossing the river. I can see it from here. Waiting the Hudson like a man wading through a brook. A bulletin's been handed to me. Martian cylinders are falling all over the country. One outside of Buffalo, one in Chicago, St. Louis. Seems to be timed and spaced. Now, the first machine reaches the shore. He stands watching, looking over the city. His steel, cowish head is even with the skyscrapers. He waits for the others. They rise like a new line of towers on the city's west side. Now they're lifting their metal hands. This is the end now. Smoke comes out. Black smoke, drifting over the city. People in the streets see it now. They're running towards the East River. Thousands of them, dropping like rats. Now the smoke's spreading faster. It reached Times Square. People are trying to run away from it, but it's no use. They're falling like flies. Now the smoke's crossing 6th Avenue, 5th Avenue, 100 yards away. It's 50 feet from...
X2L, calling CQ. 2X2L, calling CQ. 2X2L, calling CQ. New York, isn't there anyone on the air? Isn't there anyone on the air? Isn't there anyone? 2X2L.
As I set down these notes on paper, I'm obsessed by the thought I may be the last living person on Earth. I have been hiding in this empty house near Grover's Mill, a small island of daylight cut off by the black smoke from the rest of the world. All that happened before the arrival of these monstrous creatures in the world now seems part of another life. A life that has no continuity with the present. Furtive existence of the lonely derelict who pencils these words in the back of some astronomical notes bearing the signature of Richard Pearson. I looked down at my blackened hands, my torn shoes, my tattered clothes, and I tried to connect them with the professor who lives at Princeton, and who, on the night of October 30th, glimpsed through her telescope an orange splash of light on a distant planet. My husband, my colleagues, my students, my books, my observatory, my world. Where are they? Did they ever exist? Am I Richard Pearson? What day is it? Do days exist without calendars? Does time pass when there are no human hands left to wind the clocks? In writing down my daily life, I tell myself I shall preserve human history between the dark covers of this little book that were meant to record the movement of the stars. But to write, I must live, and to live, I must eat. I find moldy bread in the kitchen, an orange not too spoiled to swallow. I keep watch at the window. From time to time, I catch sight of a Martian above the black smoke. The smoke still holds the house in its black coil, but at length there is a hissing sound, and suddenly I see a Martian mounted on his machine, spraying the air with a jet of steam as if to dissipate the smoke. I watch in a corner as his huge metal legs nearly brush against the side of the house. Exhausted by terror, I fall asleep. It's morning. Morning. Sun streams in the window. The black cloud of gas is lifted, and the scorched meadows to the north look as though a black snowstorm has passed over them. I venture from the house. I make my way up to a road. No traffic. Here and there, a wrecked car, baggage overturned, a blackened skeleton. I push on north. For some reason, I feel safer trailing these monsters than running away from them, and I keep a careful watch. I have seen these Martians feed. Should one of their machines appear over the top of the trees, I am ready to fling myself flat on the earth. I come to a chestnut tree. October. Chestnut trees are ripe. I fill my pockets. I must keep alive. 2 days, I wander in a vague northerly direction through a desolate world. Finally, I notice a living creature, a small red squirrel in a beech tree. I stare at him and wonder. He stares back at me. I believe at that moment the animal and I shared the same emotion. The joy of finding another living being. I push on north. I find dead cows in a brackish field. And beyond the charred ruins of a dairy, the silo remains standing guard over the wasteland like a lighthouse deserted by the sea. Astride the silo perches a weathercock. The arrow points north. Next day, I come to a city vaguely familiar in its contours, yet its buildings strangely dwarfed and leveled off, as if a giant has sliced off its highest towers with the capricious sweep of his hand. I reached the outskirts. I found Newark, undemolished, but humbled by some whim advancing Martians. Presently, with an odd feeling of being watched, I caught sight of something crouching in a doorway. I make a step towards it. It rose up and became a human armed with a large knife.
Stop. Where do you come from?
I come from many places. A long time ago, from Princeton.
Princeton, huh? That's near Grover's Mill.
Yes.
Grover's Mill. There's no food here. This is my country. All this to the end of town, down by the river. There's only food for one. Where are you going?
I don't know. I guess I'm looking for people.
What was that? Did you hear something?
No, only a bird. A live bird!
Yeah, you get to know that birds have shadows these days. Hey, we're in the open here. Let's crawl in this doorway here and talk.
Have you seen any Martians?
Nah, they've all gone over to New York. At night the skies alive with their lights, just as if people are still living in them. By daylight, you can't see them. 5 days ago, a couple of them carried something big across the flats of the airport. I think they're learning how to fly.
Fly?
Yeah, fly.
Then it's all over with humanity. Stranger, there's still you and I. 2 of us.
Yeah.
Left.
Yeah, they got themselves in a real solid. They wrecked the greatest country in the world. Those green stars, they're probably falling somewhere every night. They've only lost one machine. There isn't anything to do. We're done. We're licked.
Where were you? You're in uniform.
Yeah, what's left of it. I was in the militia. National Guard? That's good. There wasn't any war anymore. There was a war between men and ants.
Yes, but we're edible ants. I found that out. What'll they do with us?
I've thought it all out. Right now we're cause we're wanted. The Martian only has to go a few miles to get the crowd on a run. But they won't keep on doing that. They'll begin to catch us all systematic like, keeping the best and storing us in cages and things. They ain't even begun on us yet.
Not begun?
Not begun. All that's happened so far is because we don't have a sense enough to keep quiet, bothering them with guns and such stuff and losing our heads and rushing off at crowds. Now instead of rushing around blind, we gotta fix ourselves up. Fix ourselves up according to the way things are now. Cities, nations, civilization, progress. Done.
Yes, but if that's so, what is there to live for?
Well, there won't be any concerts for a million years or so, and no nice little dinners at restaurants. If it's amusement you're after, I guess the game's up.
What is there left?
Life! That's what. I want to live. Yeah, and so do you. We're not going to be exterminated. I don't mean to be caught either. Tamed and fattened and bred like an ox.
What are you going to do?
I'm going on. Right under their feet. I've got a plan. We as people are finished. We don't know enough. We gotta learn plenty before we got a chance. And we gotta live and keep free while we learn, see? I thought it all out.
Tell me the rest.
Well, it isn't all of us that are gonna be made for wild beasts. That's what it's gotta be. That's why I watched you. All these little office workers that used to live in these houses, they'd be no good. They don't have any stuff in them. They used to run off to work. I've seen hundreds of them running to catch the commuter's train in the morning, afraid they'll be canned if they didn't. Running back at night, afraid they won't make it to town for dinner. Lives insured, a little invested in case of accidents. Yeah, and on Sundays, worried about the hereafter. The Martians will be a godsend for those guys. Nice, roomy cages, good food, careful breeding, no worries. Yeah, after a week or so chasing around the fields on empty stomachs, they'll come and be glad to get caught.
You've thought it all out, haven't you?
Sure you bet I have. That isn't all. These Martians, they're gonna make pits out of some of them and teach them to do tricks. Who knows, maybe get sentimental over a pet boy who grew up and had to be killed. Yeah, and some, maybe they'll train to hunt us.
No, that's impossible. No human being.
Yes, they will. There's men who will do it gladly. If one of them ever comes after me, why...
In the meantime, you and I and others like us, where are we to live when the Martians on the Earth?
I've got it all figured out. We'll live underground. I've been thinking about the sewers. Under New York, there are miles and miles of them. Main ones are big enough to fit anybody. And there's cellars, vaults, underground storerooms, railway tunnels, subways. You begin to see. There's a bunch of strong people together. No weak ones. All that rubbish, out.
As you meant me to go?
Well, I gave you a chance, didn't I?
We won't quarrel about that. Go on.
We've got to make ourselves some places for us to stay in, see? Get all the books we can. Science books. That's where women like you come in, see? We'll raid the museums. We'll even spy on the Martians. It may not be so much we have to learn before. Listen, just imagine this. 4 or 5 of our own fighting machines suddenly starting off. Heat rays going left and right. Now Martian in them. But humans. Humans who learned how, and it may even be our time. Gee, imagine having one of those lovely things with a heat ray wild and free. We'd turn it in on the Martians. We'd turn it in on our men. We'd bring everyone down to their knees.
That's your plan?
Yeah. You and me and a few more of us. We'd run the world.
I see.
Hey, what's the matter? Where are you going?
Not to your world. Bye, stranger. Well, after parting with the artilleryman, came at last to Holland Tunnel. I entered that silent tube anxious to know the fate of the great city on the other side of Hudson. Cautiously, I came out of the tunnel and made my way up Canal Street. I entered 14th Street, and there again were black powder and several bodies. An evil, ominous smell from the gratings of the cellars of some of the houses. I wandered up through the 30s and the 40s. I stood alone on Times Square. I caught sight of a lean dog running down 7th Avenue with a piece of dark brown meat in his jaws. a pack of starving mongrels at his heels. He made a wide circle around me, and though he feared I might prove a fresh competitor. I walked up Broadway in the direction of that strange powder, past silent shop windows, displaying their mute wares to empty sidewalks, past the Capitol Theater, silent, dark, past a shooting gallery where a row of empty guns faced an arrest line of wooden ducks. Near Columbus Circle, I noticed models of 1939 motor cars in the showrooms facing empty streets. From over the top of the General Motors building, I watched a flock of black birds circling in the sky. I hurried on. Suddenly, I caught sight of the hood of a Martian machine standing somewhere on Central Park, gleaming in the late afternoon sun. An insane idea! I rushed recklessly across Columbus Circle and into the park. I climbed a small hill above the pond at 60th Street, and from there I could see it, standing in a silent row along the mall. 19 of those great metal titans, their cowls empty, their steel arms hanging listlessly by their sides. I looked in vain for the monsters that inhabited those machines. Suddenly, my eyes were attracted to the immense flock of birds that hovered directly below me. They circled to the ground, and there, before my eyes, stark and silent, lay the Martians, with the hungry birds pecking and tearing down shreds of brown flesh from their dead bodies. Later, when the bodies were examined in laboratories, it was found they were killed by the putrefactive and diseased bacteria against which their systems were unprepared. Slain. After all man's defenses have failed, but the humblest thing that God has put on this earth. Before the cylinder fell, there was a great persuasion that through all the deep of space, no existence beyond the petty surface of our minute sphere. Now, we see further. Dim and wonderful is the vision I've conjured in my mind of life spreading slowly beyond this little seabed of the solar system, throughout the inanimate vastness of sidereal space. But that's a remote dream. It may not be that the destruction of the Martians is only a reprieve. To them, and not to us, is the future ordained, perhaps. Strange enough seems to sit in my peaceful study at Princeton, writing down this last chapter of the record begun at the deserted farm in Grover's Mill. Strange to watch children playing in the streets. Strange to see young people strolling on the green, where the new spring grass heals the last black scars of a bruised earth. Strange to watch sightseers enter the museum, where the disassembled parts of a Martian machine are kept on public wares to empty sidewalks. Past the Capitol Theater, silent, dark. Past a shooting gallery, where a row of empty guns faced an arrest line of wooden ducks. Near Columbus Circle, I noticed models of 1939 motor cars in the showrooms facing empty streets. From over the top of the General Motors building, I watched a flock of black birds circling in the sky. I hurried on. Suddenly, I caught sight of the hood of a Martian machine standing somewhere on Central Park, gleaming in the late afternoon sun. An insane idea! I rushed recklessly across Columbus Circle and into the park. I climbed a small hill above the pond at 60th Street, and from there I could see it, standing in a silent row along the mall. 19 of those great metal titans, their cowls empty, their steel arms hanging listlessly by their sides. I looked in vain for the monsters that inhabited those machines. Suddenly, my eyes were attracted to the immense flock of birds that hovered directly below me. They circled to the ground, and there, before my eyes, stark and silent, lay the Martians, with the hungry birds pecking and tearing down shreds of brown flesh from their dead bodies. Later, when the bodies were examined in laboratories, it was found they were killed by the putrefactive and diseased bacteria against which their systems were unprepared. Slain. After all man's defenses have failed, by the humblest thing that God has put on this earth. Before the cylinder fell, there was a great persuasion that through all the deep of space, no existence beyond the petty surface of our minute sphere. Now, we see further. Dim and wonderful is the vision I've conjured in my mind of life spreading slowly beyond this little seabed of the solar system, throughout the inanimate vastness of sidereal space. But that's a remote dream. It may be that the destruction of the Martians is only a reprieve to them and not to us. Is the future ordained, perhaps? Strange enough seems to sit in my peaceful study at Princeton, writing down this last chapter of the record begun at the deserted farm in Grover's Mill. Strange to watch children playing in the streets. Strange to see young people strolling on the green, where the new spring grass heals the last black scars of a bruised earth. Strange to watch sightseers enter the museum, where the disassembled parts of a Martian machine are kept on public view. Strange, when I recall it, the time when I first saw it, bright and clean-cut, hard and silent, under the dawn of that last great day.
This is Danny Lancaster, ladies and gentlemen, out of character to assure you that the War of the Worlds has no further significance than as the holiday offering it was intended to be. The Service Radio Lab's own radio version of dressing up in a sheet and jumping out of the bush and saying boo. Starting now, we couldn't soap all your windows and seal all your garden gates by tomorrow night, so we did the best next thing. We annihilated the world before your very ears and utterly destroyed YouTube. You will be relieved, I hope, to learn that we didn't mean it and that the institution is still open for business. So goodbye, everybody. And remember, please, for the next day or so, the terrible lesson you learned tonight. That grinning, glowing globular invader of your living room is an inhabitant of the pumpkin patch. And if your doorbell rings and nobody's there, it was no Martian. It's spring break.
This presentation of Orson Welles' War of the Worlds featured the voice talents of Ethan Carter, Danny Lancaster, Madison Bratcher, Willem Wagahoft, River Watson, Erica Salgatar, Thomas Schmidt, Tyson Fry, Nadia Jensen, Eva Malone, and Fortune Delanga. On behalf of Service Drama, I'd like to thank you all for listening in.